How's it going, everybody? It's Warren. Welcome back to the Cosmic Wonder, where we talk all things Marvel and MCU, and we just got WandaVision episode 8, and wow. This episode was not quite what a lot of people were expecting. However, it was extremely important as to what is happening in WandaVision, and we learned a lot about Wanda's backstory, including the fact that she was actually a witch and had powers before coming in contact with the Infinity Stone. I guess I should mention spoilers for WandaVision episode 8, but I imagine if you clicked on this video, you don't really care that much, or you've watched the episode. Now, as I mentioned, this episode was very important and leads up to the finale, which is going to be the next episode. And a lot was revealed that I'm going to break down. And there's some key things that we need to talk about here, like who Quicksilver actually is, how Wanda got her chaos magic powers in the first place, what I believe to be a Magneto Easter egg, and of course talk about how there's a villain that's even bigger than Agatha Harkness and why Agatha is terrified of this villain. Now, I'm going to start off by breaking down some of the key moments that you need to know of the episode, what they mean, and my theory of what is actually going to happen in WandaVision. Then, of course, we'll do a frame-by-frame breakdown of the entire episode of WandaVision. Of course, if you're new and you love WandaVision, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the latest Marvel videos. So this entire episode was really about one thing: Agatha Harkness trying to find out how exactly Wanda did everything that happened. How did she create this fake reality? How did she change the reality? How did she control all of these people? This is what Agatha wants to know, and her being a very, very powerful witch, as we saw in the very beginning of this episode, is kind of baffled at how powerful Wanda actually is. Now, something to note here is that Agatha actually didn't know Wanda. She just noticed her spells, as she mentioned in the episode. Agatha said that she sensed this place, talking about Westview. She said she sensed the afterglow of so many spells cast all at once. And she said that she couldn't make heads or tails of it. And this is really saying something, because if you recall the opening scene, she overpowered a lot of different witches, including her mother, who was the head witch and possible goddess of witchcraft, which we'll talk about in just a bit. But Agatha knows her witchcraft and she's extremely powerful, yet Wanda kind of baffles her. Wanda's magic baffles her. And Agatha kind of starts to explain this. Agatha compares her witchcraft to Wanda's witchcraft. She says Wanda had thousands of people under her thumb. She had complex storylines filled out. She had witchcraft going for miles and miles. She says that Wanda has every single detail of this illusion down to the crown molding, while expressing that it took her years and years to master even very simple spells like illusion and transmutation. Agatha is baffled here, and she wants to figure out how Wanda is doing everything, so she begins to take Wanda through her past, all with the purpose of trying to find out how Wanda did everything. And it doesn't seem like all of this was due to the Infinity Stone. Agatha doesn't really think that's that big of a deal. She casually says, so you came in contact with an Infinity Stone that amplified your powers that were already there. And then she says she has a theory, but she needs more evidence. She gets a little bit closer and says, tell me how you did it. Again, demanding to know how Wanda exactly did everything, because she doesn't really know how Wanda is this powerful. But then at the end, she finally realizes what Wanda is. And we finally get the Scarlet Witch name drop, and we hear chaos magic. And this is what it really is all about: chaos magic. And I believe this reveals the next big bad of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Chaos magic is a magic that was believed to be so powerful it was thought to be non-existent. Even the Sorcerer Supreme thought that it was made up. This magic can reconstruct realities, manipulate them, warp them. It can change the very fabric of existence, which is actually what we've seen Wanda do. But it can actually bring total destruction to the cosmos, affecting not only the Earth, but the entire universe. Now, this magic came from, originally, the elder god and archdemon Chthon. He used this magic to rule Earth as the god of chaos, and eventually his rule ended, but all of the mages got together on Earth and they decided to spread a lie. They said there's no god of chaos and there is no chaos magic. And this is why Agatha says you're supposed to be a myth. However, before Chthon was banished from the Earth dimension, he actually ran into Wanda Maximoff, and he touched her, or marked her, and left her with a fraction of his power, a fraction of his chaos energy. And this is what Agatha Harkness realizes. She heard the ancient myth, so she knows that must mean the elder god Chthon is real, and a part of him is left with Wanda. This is how Wanda truly got her chaos magic powers. Not from the Infinity Stone, but from the Elder God Chthon. This is why she can use chaos magic, which means there is a possibility of him returning to Earth. And I think we might actually see this, but I don't think we're going to see this until Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. So now the question is, what are Agatha's plans? Because I think one of two things are happening here. The first thing that could be happening is that Agatha is truly scared. Yes, she is depicted as bad, but keep in mind that over 300 years have passed since that opening scene took place. She may not be all that bad anymore. And the reason that she came to Westview was to investigate the spells that were happening, and now that she realizes it's chaos magic, the power of the Elder God Chthon, she fears for her life, she fears for the Earth and the universe, and needs to stop Wanda. Because if you notice in her lair when she's explaining how long it took her to master simple spells and how powerful Wanda's spells actually are, she looks genuinely scared. And then at the end when she realizes what it actually is, she again looks terrified. And then the second thing that could be happening here is that she actually truly is bad, an evil witch, and she's frustrated that Wanda actually has such power. Frustrated that she has chaos magic, because it's very clear from the opening scene that Agatha herself dabbled in what we'll call the dark arts. This is why the other witches got together to try and kill her, because of how powerful she was going to become learning this dark magic. So having studied dark magic and knowing what chaos magic is, she may actually try to summon Chthon for her own purposes. Either way, it's very clear by what Agatha says. It seems to be that Wanda has some of her powers because of this Elder God Chthon, and I believe that this is going to be a big part moving forward in the MCU, specifically with Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. But let me know what you think about this theory in the comments down below. And now we'll break it down scene by scene, talk about the major things that you need to know, and break down all the Easter eggs. So episode 8 starts off in Salem, Massachusetts in 1693. Now, this is where and also when the actual Salem witch trials took place in real life. In Salem, Massachusetts, between 1692 and 1693, more than 200 people were accused of being witches. 30 were found guilty and 19 of them were executed by hanging. However, the people who are hunting Agatha down are not humans accusing witches of being witches, but are actually witches accusing Agatha of violating their rules. They say that she stole knowledge above her age and station. Now, Agatha exists within a coven of witches, and in their coven there is a hierarchy, and there are ranks that you have to pass through, and the higher your rank, the higher magic you are allowed to learn. Well, the witches accuse Agatha of learning magic she was not yet allowed to learn, which so happened to be the darkest of magics. They claim that she broke their rules, but Agatha wittingly says, "I didn't break your rules, they simply bent to my power," admitting that she did in fact break the rules. Now, once she admits this, the witches decide that it's game over for Agatha, or so at least they would think. And then they start to chant. Now they appear to be saying, in Latin, mors mantra naturae. And this is very interesting because it ties into something that we've been looking into this whole entire time. Mors is actually the Roman deity or god of darkness and agony. Mors is also the personification of death and is often depicted having a scythe in her hand. Now, we've talked about death and the Grim Reaper plenty of times when it's come to WandaVision. We've had the Grim Reaper Easter egg, and we've believed this whole entire time that the brooch that Agatha wears actually has a scythe on it, much like the one that the Grim Reaper or Death would have. And it's revealed that she ended up getting this brooch actually from her mother, who she ended up killing. Now, the other part of the chant seems to be mantra, which of course could be monster, and naturi could be natural, claiming that Agatha could be a natural monster. Now, it's unclear on whether or not they are actually calling her the Roman god or goddess of death, or if they are calling upon the god of death to kill her. Either way, it does seem like death is a part of WandaVision in some way, shape, or form. Now, when her mother goes to kill her, we can see that there is a crown on her head. Now, this could be an Easter egg for the goddess of witchcraft in the Marvel Universe. However, in the comics, the goddess of witchcraft was not Agatha Harkness's mother, and she was a god. So the crown on her head is more than likely just pointing to the fact that she is the head of all of the witches there, the queen of all of the other witches. Side note, this scene right here actually sets up Dr. Doom. His mother, Cynthia Von Doom, was actually a witch in a coven as well. She was very powerful, and Dr. Doom would go on to become one of the greatest sorcerers of all all time in the Marvel Universe. There's also a connection between Doom and Mephisto, and I still believe the ultimate main villain could be some amalgamation of Chthon, Mephisto, and Nightmare all combined into one. We then go back to Agatha's lair where we left off in episode 7, and the first thing that happens is that her rabbit actually makes a noise, like he's talking to her, and she holds him up and says, "What's that?" Like he really is talking to her. Now perhaps this could actually be something which is what we've expected from the very beginning since we've met Senior Scratchy. Agatha does have a son called Nicholas Scratch, who could somehow be the rabbit. My buddy Brad Lambert also has a theory that perhaps this could be Doctor Strange. Perhaps Agatha ran into Doctor Strange at some point in time going for Wanda, and her, being the super powerful witch that she is, turned him into a rabbit. After all, she does mention transmutation. Fun theory to think about, not sure if it'll actually happen, but I think this rabbit actually is a person, which we'll find out about eventually. Now Wanda tries to read Agatha's mind, but she can't. Agatha is way too powerful and experienced for Wanda to be able to do that. And here she explains actual witchcraft to Wanda, which Wanda isn't that experienced in. Wanda doesn't realize that she is actually a witch. She still thinks she got her powers from the Infinity Stone, which we now know is not accurate. She is indeed a witch, and Agatha expects her to know all about spells. She explains the basic protection spells and how Wanda can't do magic in the space where Agatha did these spells, and she explains that there are runes on the wall. And one of these runes, glowing purple, looks an awful lot like Magneto's helmet and the M for Magneto. Now, we've been speculating for a long time that in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Wanda's father could actually be Magneto. This is a story straight from the comics where Wanda learns that the Maximoffs aren't her real parents, but Magneto is in fact her dad. And perhaps Magneto could be this secret cameo appearing in the final episode that we've been hearing about. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning, Agatha's goal is to know how Wanda did everything. How she controlled all of the people in Westview, how she cast all these spells at once. And we learned that that's actually what Evan Peters' Pietro was for. He was a product of Agatha. She was possessing him. And this explains why he was always asking her how she did everything. Because it was actually Agatha possessing him, wanting to know how she did it. Now, she does say that it actually wasn't her, just her eyes and her ears. It actually is a physical human person. And she says that she couldn't get her actual brother because he wasn't on the same continent and he had a bunch of holes in him. This also explains as to why Vision was sometimes seen dead and Quicksilver was seen with bullet holes in him that one time. This was Agatha attempting to find out more about Wanda and how she created everything. She was trying to provoke something inside of Wanda. As she said, she waited very patiently, but now she has to resort to simply controlling her and trying to get it out of her. The question is this the Quicksilver from the Fox X-Men universe? And unfortunately, I'm kind of leaning towards no, I don't think it is. I think that it's a person that she plucked out of nowhere, and I think Marvel was being very clever with the casting of Evan Peters. But I hope I'm wrong, and I hope the multiverse truly is opening up. Now, in one scene where Agatha throws the bird to her rabbit and the rabbit eats it, the rabbit is sitting on a table, and on that table is a book that has a symbol of a tree on it. And this tree actually resembles the tree that we see in Captain America: The First Avenger, where Red Skull finds the Tesseract. It doesn't look exactly the same, but it does resemble it, so this could perhaps be some type of Asgardian book. Agatha is a witch that has been around for a very, very long time, so I'm sure she knows about Asgardians. Now again, Agatha just wants to know how Wanda did everything, but Wanda has repressed all of her thoughts and feelings and doesn't remember how she did it. She truly doesn't remember doing it. So Agatha decides that it's time to take a trip to her past in hopes to awaken Wanda's memories and to hopefully see who Wanda really is. And it starts with Wanda as a child. And here is where we learn why WandaVision has been seen through sitcoms. In Sokovia, Wanda's father used to sell DVDs of sitcoms in order to try and make money. This is revealed when her father comes home with a suitcase full of DVDs and he says to his wife, "Don't worry, I'll sell them all tomorrow." And if you take a look inside of the suitcase, we actually see the sitcoms that we've been through in the WandaVision series: I Love Lucy, Bewitched, Malcolm in the Middle, The Addams Family, and Who's the Boss, all of which we have seen in WandaVision. Pietro comes in and reveals that the reason they do TV night is so they can learn English, probably in preparation to move to a country that speaks English. Considering that their country is at war, it would make sense that the parents would want to move the family away. The parents revealed that they're trying to get rid of their Sokovian accents, which is actually made fun of quite a few times during WandaVision, including this episode, where Agnes says that accent comes and goes. Marvel fans have noticed that after Age of Ultron, Wanda's accent disappeared. She no longer had a Sokovian accent. So this is kind of Marvel's way of making fun of themselves, but also giving us an explanation. Now, instead of little Wanda coming out, Wanda actually goes into the scene and takes the place of her younger self, seeing it through her eyes when she was young. It's apparently her turn to pick the show that they're going to watch, and she picks the Dick Van Dyke Show, which of course we've seen WandaVision go through in one of their sitcom eras. Pietro even makes a statement that it's sitcoms, always sitcoms with Wanda, which explains why Wanda's perfect reality that she created was made inside of a sitcom. As they start the Dick Van Dyke Show, they're even in separate beds like Wanda and Vision were in for the first couple of episodes. Now, unfortunately, as they are watching TV and Wanda is very much enjoying herself, their house is hit by a missile. And we finally see the scene that Wanda and Pietro told Ultron in Age of Ultron, how their parents died and how a rocket landed in front of them, and they just stared at it, and on it, it said Stark. This was originally why Wanda and Pietro volunteered for Hydra's experiments and ultimately went on to fight with Ultron. They wanted revenge on Tony Stark for being the one who provided the missiles that killed their parents. As the rocket sits there in their living room, a light on it beeps, just like in the commercial that we got for the Stark Industry toaster. As they were waiting for the toaster to pop and be ready, the red light flashed just like it did on this rocket. Now, as the twins are just staring at these rockets, the Dick Van Dyke Show is still playing in the background. And the situation of the show suddenly matches the situation of their real life when you hear them say, "Oh, I heard a scream. Oh, I must have screamed." Dick goes on to say, "Oh, what a nightmare," which is exactly what Wanda and Pietro were going through in that moment, a nightmare. Wanda tries to comfort herself by saying, and at the end of the episode, you realize it was all a bad dream or a nightmare. We then see Wanda reach out her hand towards the missile, but then Agatha pulls her out of there. And here's where our whole perspective on Wanda actually starts to change. Agatha realizes that Wanda was a witch since the very beginning, and Wanda was actually the one who stopped the bomb from going off using a probability hex. Although she didn't know it at the time, she just thought that it never went off. She just thought it was defective, but really it was a probability hex. And thank you to one of my subscribers, Alex Majors, for pointing out the fact that Nexus beings have the power to affect probability. In WandaVision episode 7, we got a commercial for a Nexus pill, which we believe is referring to Wanda being a Nexus being. Agatha realizes that Wanda is a witch, but she realizes that her powers aren't that strong at this point in time, and they have to develop even further. So she asks Wanda, where did you get the big guns? When did you start to become so powerful? And that brings us to the next scene where Hydra does experiments on Wanda and Pietro, although we don't see Pietro. Again, in Age of Ultron, we learned that Wanda and Pietro volunteered to be experimented on. They did this because of the bomb that had Stark Industries on it. They wanted to go and fight against him. So they volunteered for Hydra. All of a sudden, the door appears and the Hydra symbol is on it. We enter the door and see two Hydra scientists, one of which I believe could be Strucker. It is a different actor from Age of Ultron, but it's a bald man, and we know that Strucker was the one who experimented on Wanda and Pietro. There's also been, of course, the Strucker callbacks in the commercials that we got in the WandaVision series, where we had the Hydra Strucker watch. So even though it's a different actor, this is most likely Strucker. And in the background, we see Loki's staff. One of the doctors says to begin the experimentation, and the other says, with respect, not one subject has survived direct contact, meaning that everybody else they did experiments on died. But they start the experiment anyways. Now, as Wanda approaches the staff, something very interesting happens. The Infinity Stone jumps out of the staff and goes in front of Wanda. It appears to know Wanda, and it looks as if it's almost speaking to her. And what's even more interesting is that the stone is actually blue. Now, when Wanda gets close enough to it and almost touches it, it kind of explodes. It's almost breaking its outer shell, and we see the actual Mind Stone. Then it explodes, but instead of destroying Wanda, it's held back by something. And we find out that it's actually being held back by the Scarlet Witch. Now, how I interpret this is actually Wanda. It's a manifestation of who is inside of her. At this point in time, she did not know that she was a witch, but clearly, as Agatha states, she is a Scarlet Witch. And this power, this Scarlet Witch inside of her, is what saved her. Proof that this is actually a manifestation to Wanda and Wanda only is that when the doctors reviewed the footage, we actually didn't see the Infinity Stone come out of the scepter and go up to Wanda. This is something that only she saw. Then Agatha adds, she got up close and personal with an Infinity Stone, and it amplified a power inside of her that would have died. So essentially what happened here is that the Infinity Stone awakened the Scarlet Witch inside of her. And that's what we see here during this explosion. The explosion is kind of taking place inside of her. Then, as Wanda goes back to her room, we see her watching yet another sitcom, The Brady Bunch, again further explaining why WandaVision was originally a sitcom. It was all because of Wanda's past. But this isn't good enough for Agatha. Contact with an Infinity Stone doesn't explain why Wanda is so powerful. But as Agatha states, she has a theory, and I believe that this theory is Wanda has chaos magic because she has been marked by Chthon. But Agatha states that she needs more. So we head to the Avengers compound after the events of Avengers Age of Ultron. Here, Wanda talks about how alone she was because she was in a new country and her brother died, but she had what she always had, a sitcom to watch. This time she was watching Malcolm in the Middle. This series was one of the series that was seen in her father's briefcase of the DVDs that he was selling, so this most likely brought her some comfort, but ultimately brought her some sadness, making her think about her family and the times they used to watch TV together. Here is where we see the relationship of Wanda and Vision start to form. Wanda actually senses Vision before he comes in the room. She calls for him and has him come sit next to her. And from here, we actually see a very surprisingly human Vision. It seems like he's kind of starting to understand feelings and emotions. This would explain why he, a synthezoid, was able to actually fall in love with Wanda, and it was through interacting with her that he was able to learn about these emotions. And he's surprisingly deep. He even drops the line on us, but what is grief if not love persevering? And here's where they truly start to bond and gain feelings for each other. Even Agatha herself sheds a tear. But it's not enough for Agatha. She still doesn't know how Wanda did everything. So she pushes her even further, telling her that everyone was gone, but she wanted Vision back. And from here, a door to the sword facility opens up and we learn the truth, not the lie that Hayward told us, but the actual truth. Now, this appears to be the same time that Monica Rambeau came back to working for SWORD, as the televisions on top have the same news that they had when Monica Rambeau was walking into the SWORD facility for the first time. They're all about people coming back from the blip, the snap, whatever you want to call it, and families reuniting. And of course, there are celebrations happening everywhere. Now, Wanda is actually trying to be pretty civil here because she has the capability to just burst in and kind of overpower everybody. But instead, she talks to the person at the front desk, and despite him giving her resistance, she says, I know Vision is here, but she says that when she came back, he was gone. And we know that Hayward took Vision's body and is dissecting it here at the SWORD facility so he can actually make weapons out of Vision. And Wanda just wants a funeral for Vision, and she also wants it for herself because she wants that closure, and she feels that after everything she's been through, she deserves that. Now, eventually, Hayward gets on the phone, lets her in. Not that she needed anybody to let her in because she gets in by herself anyways, but again, trying to be a good citizen, and eventually goes and meets Hayward in his office. And here's where we learn that Hayward really is just the worst jerk that you've ever seen. He shows Wanda that they're disassembling Vision because he's the world's most sophisticated sentient weapon ever made. After all, that's what SWORD does. They stand for Sentient Weapon, Observation, and Response Division. And Hayward says that he can't let Wanda escape with $3 billion worth of vibranium, and all he can do is let her say goodbye to him here. Wanda says, he's all I have, and Hayward says, well, that's just it, Wanda. He isn't yours, and that sends Wanda over the edge. Wanda breaks the glass, jumps down, but instead of attacking everybody and taking Vision's body, she simply says goodbye. She tries to sense him and feel him, which is a callback to Avengers Infinity War during the beginning where Wanda and Vision were in the hotel together, and Wanda felt the Infinity Stone inside of Vision and said, all I feel is you. Now, him being dismantled and the Mind Stone not a part of him, she can't feel him anymore. But she leaves. She doesn't take Vision's body like Hayward told everybody else she did. And of course, as we know from the post-credit scene, he did reassemble Vision as his own sentient weapon. So it's very clear at this point in time that he is a bad guy. He's a villain. Now, is he just a jerk? Perhaps, but he could also be a Skrull. We know that Marvel announced the Secret Invasion Disney Plus show, which is the story that revolves heavily around the Skrull. So perhaps Hayward is a Skrull, and this will lead into that Disney Plus series. And here's where we start to figure everything out. Wanda has a letter in her car which sends her to Westview, New Jersey. And we find out that Westview really isn't that great of a town. In fact, it's pretty sad. And the people that are in it are pretty sad as well. It looks like most of the businesses are going out of business. And we start to see the normal versions of the characters that Wanda was controlling. We see Herb walk down the street, who doesn't have an afro. We then see Norm posting a flyer for learning piano. Clearly everything in Westview is in a pretty bad financial state, so he's trying to make some money here. We see Mrs. Hart, who doesn't really seem that happy in life, and really neither do any of the citizens of Westview, it appears. Wanda eventually finds herself arriving at a lot, where a home was apparently built before or was going to be built, but it stopped. And it looks like this was apparently going to be a gift from Vision to Wanda. They were going to build a house here and grow old together, as Vision writes on his note, to grow old in, V, with a heart around it. This is what Wanda and Vision were going to do. They were going to get away from it all, get away from the Avengers, the superhero life. They were going to move to a small town and just be together. And Wanda, knowing this and being on the property of where her future house was supposed to be with her husband Vision, sends her over the edge and her chaos magic explodes. And if you look at it, it is different magic from her than we've seen before. This is true chaos magic that we're seeing. And this is what took Westview and warped it into her own reality. Remember, chaos magic is the magic to control reality. And she bases this new reality off of the sitcoms that she loved growing up. Now, as she changes the reality of Westview, we can see a painting advertisement on the side of a building that says, "Make cleaning up a snap," obviously referencing the snap that Thanos did, but also referencing the fact that she is cleaning up this town and turning it into her new reality. And this is an advertisement for Lagos paper towels that we saw in a commercial before. Lagos, of course, being where Wanda accidentally killed people in Captain America Civil War. We then see a theater change that reads the Tannhäuser Gate, which is a Blade Runner reference, and then it changes to Big Red and Kidnapped. Kidnap, of course, because Agatha Harkness kidnapped her sons. And then something very interesting happens. As Wanda creates this reality with her chaos magic and recreates this town, there is a golden energy that flows out of her to create Vision. Now, the Mind Stone is what powered Vision, and of course it was a golden yellowish color as well. The Mind Stone is also what enhanced Wanda's abilities. So it could be energy from the Infinity Stone that is within inside Wanda that is being used to create Vision here. Perhaps meaning that Vision may have some hope of surviving outside of the Hex after all. Now, after the chaos magic is done, she arrives in her perfect world set in a sitcom reality where Vision, of course, is alive. And this is all Agatha needs to see. She understands everything now. Agatha disappears, Wanda hears her kids crying and runs to them where Agatha has them. Very violently, might I add. It looks like she's about to rip their heads off. And here's where I talked about in the beginning, Agatha knows who she is. She's the Scarlet Witch, she has chaos magic, which is supposed to be a myth that she probably got from Chthon. And it ends with her finally saying, the Scarlet Witch. But of course, we have yet another post-credit scene in episode 8. In episode 7, Hayward talked about a launch, and as I mentioned in my other breakdown, I believed that it was going to be a weapon. I actually believed it was going to be another version of Ultron, and as it turns out, I was right. They recreated Vision. They said that they took him apart and put him back together a million times, but they couldn't find a strong enough power supply. That is until Wanda threw the drone back at him that was seemingly charged with her power, and this power was enough to bring a new Vision to life. Now, this Vision is a white-gray version of Vision, which is a callback to the West Coast Avengers Vision. And this new Vision is brought back to life, but instead of the Mind Stone in his head, it almost looks like he has a tiny little arc reactor like Tony Stark had in his chest. Now remember, when Vision was originally created, he was supposed to be Ultron, and now S.W.O.R.D. has rebuilt him as a weapon, and he doesn't have the Mind Stone. So this is essentially a different version of Ultron that S.W.O.R.D. controls, at least for the moment, because I don't think they'll be able to control him for very long. Now this sets up quite a big fight for the finale. We're going to have Agatha Harkness and Wanda, the Vision that Wanda created and the Vision that S.W.O.R.D. created, her twin boys, hopefully, and Evan Peters' Quicksilver, and Monica Rambeau, which we didn't see in this episode. So it's all shaping up for a pretty big finale, and it looks like we're going to have a lot of fight sequences. So what did you think about WandaVision episode 8? And what do you think we're going to see in the finale? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the WandaVision theories or breakdowns. Don't forget to give the video a like. For live updates, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter. And as always, thank you all so much for watching. Woof woof.